My name is Madison Clay, and I was 29 years old the day I stood in my white gown with a knife in my hand, smiling for cameras that felt like they belonged to strangers. The guests clapped as Ethan and I pressed the blade into the first tier of the wedding cake, the sugary scent of buttercream floating in the air. Laughter rippled through the room, but inside me there was nothing but a hollow ache. The chairs on my side of the aisle had sat empty all afternoon. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister, not even Chloe, my so-called best friend, had shown up. I forced a smile as Ethan whispered in my ear, but the vibration in my pocket betrayed me. I pulled my phone out just enough to see the screen flash a text from Mom. "We need to talk. Now." My breath hitched. Beneath it stacked 36 missed calls, all from Mom, Dad, and Emily. My hands trembled, and a cold wave swept through me. They had abandoned me, but suddenly, urgently, they wanted my attention. What could possibly be so dire to make sense of the silence on one of the biggest days of my life? I need to take you back to the beginning, to the family that looked perfect from the outside, but was fractured at its core. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in a picture book neighborhood where the lawns were clipped short and the houses smelled of barbecues on summer nights. My parents, Richard and Helen, played the role of the respectable couple, always ready with polite smiles at church and Christmas cards lined up on the mantel. And then there was Emily, 2 years younger than me, with curls like spun gold and a voice that made strangers stop in grocery aisles. From the time she could walk, she was the star. My mother enrolled her in ballet, voice lessons, piano classes, anything that could put her on a stage. She wore costumes glittering under spotlights while I sat in the audience, with my report cards folded in my lap, waiting for someone to care that I had earned straight A's. Nobody ever did. When I announced one night that I had been accepted into an advanced science program at school, Mom barely glanced up from fastening sequins onto Emily's dance outfit. "That's nice, honey. Leave the letter on the counter so Dad can see it later." 2 nights later, when Emily won 3rd place in a local singing competition, they whisked us out to an Italian restaurant, ordered champagne, and toasted their little star. I stirred my pasta in silence, wondering why my accomplishments never merited more than a passing nod. That was the pattern of my childhood, my victories, invisible Emily's smallest triumphs magnified. I told myself it was just the way families worked, some kids shine brighter. But as the years wore on, it became clear that it wasn't about talent. It was about favoritism, pure and toxic. When I graduated high school, an honor student with scholarship offers, my parents were absent from the ceremony. They were in California taking Emily to an audition. "You understand, don't you?" Mom said on the phone when I asked why they couldn't split their time. "This is important for her future." I said I understood, but as I walked across the stage in front of empty chairs, the applause felt hollow. I learned early to swallow disappointment like bitter medicine. College in San Francisco gave me my first taste of freedom. I could finally step out from my sister's shadow, at least for a while. But each holiday dragged me back. Thanksgiving dinner always canceled because Emily had rehearsals. Christmas morning. My gifts were an afterthought while Emily's were piled high under the tree. I remember one December holding up a pair of socks while my sister shrieked over a diamond pendant. My father laughed indulgently. "She's our golden girl." It wasn't jealousy that ate at me. I didn't want to sing or twirl on a stage. What I wanted was fairness, acknowledgement, a sign that my hard work mattered. Instead, I felt like an emotional orphan in my own home. When I left for college, I built a new circle. A new kind of family. Chloe Ramirez was the first to take me seriously. We met during freshman orientation, and she instantly understood the sharp sting of being overlooked. Her own parents had divorced, each too distracted to notice her most days. Chloe became my anchor. Through dorm nights spent cramming through heartbreaks and triumphs, she was the sister I wished I'd had instead of Emily. After graduation, we moved to Seattle together, sharing a tiny apartment where the heat clanged in the winter and we could hear the neighbors fighting through the walls. But it was ours, and for the first time in my life, I felt chosen. Still, even Chloe couldn't protect me from the ache of birthdays with no phone calls or the emptiness of holidays when my family's seats were vacant. I buried myself in work, determined to prove to myself, if not to them, that I was worthy. I earned promotions, built a name in biomedical engineering. But no matter what I achieved, a voice whispered, "It's not enough. You're not enough." Then Ethan walked into my life. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and his laugh carried across the room like warm sunlight. On our third date, I confessed the truth about my family, expecting him to shift uncomfortably or change the subject like others had. Instead, he reached across the table, his hand closing over mine. "That's not normal, Madison. That's betrayal. You were excluded, and that's not okay." His words struck through years of self-doubt. For once, someone didn't minimize my pain. He named it. He validated it. With Ethan, I learned what love without conditions looked like. His parents, Linda and Robert, treated me like their own daughter from the start. Linda called me just to ask how my day went. Robert clipped articles about scientific breakthroughs and mailed them with notes in the margins. "Thought you'd enjoy this." His sister Olivia invited me to brunch, laughing as if we had always been siblings. The contrast was jarring, almost painful. I cried in their guest bathroom the first Christmas I spent with them, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of stockings with my name on them. Ethan found me there, and without words, he understood. By the time Ethan proposed, 2 years later, in a small independent theater, where he had edited a reel of our memories into a makeshift trailer, I had begun to heal. As the lights flicked back on and he knelt with a ring, I felt the room erupt into applause. I said yes through tears. That night, with champagne fizzing in our tiny kitchen, the anxiety began to creep in. How would my parents react? Would they show up this time finally when it mattered? Most Ethan held me, whispering, "We'll handle whatever comes. They can't take this from us." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep down, a hollow echo warned me that the story of favoritism, betrayal, and injustice was far from over. I had no idea that the next time I overheard my mother's voice, it would confirm my worst fears, that no one from my family ever intended to come to my wedding. College in San Francisco was supposed to be my fresh start, the clean break I had been craving, ever since I realized my place in the Clay family hierarchy would never change. The moment I unpacked my bags in that tiny dorm room, I swore to myself that I would stop waiting for my parents to notice me. The city outside my window buzzed with possibility, neon lights flickering over cable cars and street musicians playing saxophones on the corner. I wanted to disappear into it, to shed the skin of the forgotten daughter. For a while it worked. My phone barely rang, and when it did, the voice on the other end was only half listening. "Emily's got another call back," Mom would say, her tone bubbling with excitement. "She's in the running for a commercial spot." If I tried to mention a grade I was proud of, or the internship I had just landed, her responses were flat, distracted. I stopped offering details. After all, why hand over my heart for them to ignore? Then came Chloe. We met on the second day of freshman orientation. She was leaning against a wall in the student union, balancing a coffee cup precariously on a stack of psych textbooks. A strand of dark hair fell in her eyes, and she muttered something sarcastic about the chaos of finding classrooms. I laughed, and just like that, a spark of recognition passed between us. We sat together at lunch, traded stories, and by nightfall it felt like we'd known each other for years. Chloe's life wasn't perfect either. Her parents' divorce had left her shuttling between 2 homes that never really felt like hers. She understood in her bones what it was like to crave a family that didn't exist. That was what made her different. She didn't tell me to get over it when I mentioned Emily. She didn't say I was exaggerating. She nodded. She listened. She said, "That must have hurt like hell." And she was right. It did. By junior year, we were inseparable. We got an off-campus apartment with thin walls and a leaky faucet. We studied together, cooked pasta on Sunday nights, and whispered secrets into the early hours. When my parents forgot to call on my birthday, Chloe showed up with a cake she had baked herself, candles dripping wax onto the frosting as she sang off-key. "Families can be chosen," she said, and in that moment, she was mine. Still, the ache of home found me in unexpected moments. Thanksgiving dinners where my parents texted last minute to say they were flying to Los Angeles for Emily's rehearsal. Christmas mornings when the phone stayed silent, the only message a picture Mom posted on Facebook of Emily under a mountain of gifts. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Chloe. I had friends who cheered when I aced exams. I had professors who knew my name. But the emptiness lingered like a bruise you forget about until someone presses it. Then Ethan walked into my life. It was Chloe who dragged me to the birthday party of a mutual friend. I didn't want to go, but she insisted. You've been buried in textbooks for weeks. Come on, one night of fun won't kill you. I agreed reluctantly, and that night changed everything. Ethan was leaning against the bar when Chloe introduced us. He was tall, with dark hair, and eyes the color of ocean water right before a storm. When he laughed, the whole room seemed to lean closer. We ended up talking for hours, tucked into a corner with cheap beer and music pounding overhead. He asked questions nobody else had bothered to about my work, my passions, what I dreamed of beyond grades and careers. On our third date, I broke one of my own rules. I told him about my family. Not the polished version I offered most people, but the raw truth. The favoritism, the neglect, the constant overshadowing by Emily. I braced myself for the awkward silence, the quick subject change. Instead, Ethan reached across the table, his hand warm against mine. That's not normal, Madison. That's betrayal. You were excluded, and you didn't deserve it. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent years wondering if I was too sensitive, if maybe it was selfish to want more. But Ethan's voice was steady, certain. He didn't minimize. He named what it was: betrayal. From that night, something shifted. I started to believe my feelings were valid. I started to believe maybe I was worth more than scraps of attention. Ethan didn't just tell me he loved me, he proved it. He showed up for me. He celebrated the little things, from a presentation at work to a new recipe I mastered. He cheered as though each moment mattered. And then came his family. Linda and Robert welcomed me like I was already theirs. Linda called just to chat, her voice warm and curious. Robert mailed me articles clipped from science journals with notes scrawled in the margins. Thought you'd enjoy this. Their daughter Olivia invited me to brunch and teased me like a real sister. The first time I spent Christmas with them, I found a stocking hung by the fireplace with my name stitched across the top. I excused myself to the bathroom, tears streaming down my cheeks. Linda knocked gently, asking if I was all right. I couldn't explain the mixture of joy and grief that overwhelmed me, so I just whispered, "Thank you." Ethan found me later, pulled me into a corner, and said, "This is what family looks like. This is what you deserve." I believed him. 2 years passed in a blur of building a life together, late-night takeout, weekend hikes, whispered plans for the future. On the anniversary of our first date, Ethan suggested we see a movie at the little independent theater down the street. I didn't suspect a thing until the film cut out halfway through and a slideshow began to play. Pictures of us, our first vacation, messy hair in the kitchen, the night we adopted our dog. Our favorite songs swelled through the speakers. Then the lights came up and Ethan was on one knee, ring glinting in his hand. "Madison Clay," he said, his voice shaking but his eyes steady. "You are the strongest, kindest, most brilliant woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" My hands flew to my mouth, tears blurring my vision. "Yes," I whispered, then louder, "yes." The room erupted in applause. Chloe was in the audience, clapping and screaming. Strangers stood to cheer. That night, we popped champagne in our tiny kitchen. I laughed until my cheeks hurt, but as the bubbles fizzed and the clock ticked past midnight, a knot formed in my stomach. I hadn't told my parents yet. Ethan noticed. "They'll be happy for you," he said, but his voice carried a hesitation he couldn't hide. I shook my head. "You don't know them like I do. They'll find a way to make this about Emily." He pulled me close, kissed my forehead. "Then we'll make it about us. No matter what they do, they can't take this from us." I wanted so badly to believe him, but I couldn't shake the dread. Deep down, I knew the patterns of toxic family and favoritism don't disappear overnight. And though I didn't know it yet, I would soon overhear a conversation that proved me right, one that would twist my stomach into knots and change everything I thought I knew about loyalty, betrayal, and what it means when parents choose sides. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed with the ring still glittering on my finger, my phone heavy in my hand. I had rehearsed the words all night. Mom, Dad, Ethan proposed. I'm getting married. My stomach twisted as I pressed call. It rang 4 times before Mom answered. Hi, Mom, I said quickly before I could lose my nerve. I have news. Ethan proposed last night and I said yes. We're engaged. There was silence just long enough to make my chest tighten. Then her voice came flat, almost distracted. Oh, that's good. Congratulations. I waited for more questions about the proposal, excitement about the ring, maybe even a squeal of joy. Nothing came. Instead, she launched right into Emily just booked a national commercial. Isn't that wonderful? The sting was sharp, immediate. I forced my voice to stay steady. We're planning a spring wedding, maybe 6 months from now. That's quite soon, she replied, tone clipped. Well, let us know the details when you have them. Another pause, then brighter. But Emily's audition went so well. We think she's going to get the part. My hand trembled around the phone. Mom, this is my engagement, I whispered. Doesn't that matter? Of course it does, honey. We're happy for you. Her words sounded rehearsed, hollow. Then she excused herself, saying Emily needed help rehearsing. When I hung up, the silence in the apartment roared. I stared at the wall until Ethan came in, concern etched across his face. I told him everything, my voice breaking. He pulled me into his chest, murmuring, You matter. To me, you'll always matter. But the ache only grew. Later that night, I called Chloe. She gasped in delight, demanding every detail about the proposal, the ring, the slideshow at the theater. Her joy was so loud it made up for a moment for my family's emptiness. Still, when I confessed what Mom had said, Chloe went quiet. Then she hissed, That's toxic, Maddie. They should be shouting from the rooftops, not comparing you to Emily again. Her anger steadied me. I just wanted this one moment to be about me, I admitted. Then, make it about you, she said fiercely. Don't let them rewrite the script this time. But deep down, I feared the script was already written. Over the following weeks, Ethan and I began planning. We toured a venue in Tacoma, a historic building with tall windows and polished wood floors that glowed golden in the afternoon light. I ran my hand along the banister, imagining walking down those stairs in white. We chose lilies and peonies for the bouquets, settled on a cozy Italian restaurant for catering, and hired a photographer who specialized in candid shots, moments of laughter, tears, the in-betweens. Each detail felt right, each choice a declaration that this day would be ours. Yet a shadow followed me. I mailed the invitations with trembling hands, one addressed to Richard and Helen Clay, another to Emily. Weeks passed. No reply. One evening I dialed my mother again. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk. Did you receive the invitation, I asked. Yes, we got it. The venue needs a head count soon. Will you be there? We'll try, of course, but you know how busy things get with Emily. She's got callbacks in Los Angeles. Mom, it's my wedding day. My voice cracked. I need you there. Of course, honey. We'll do our best. Her tone was so casual it made me want to scream. The following week I asked Dad if he would do the father-daughter dance. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll have to check my schedule. I swallowed hard. Your schedule. For my wedding, I'll get back to you, he muttered, and changed the subject to Emily's latest audition. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, phone heavy in my palm. They were slipping away and I couldn't stop them. Ethan noticed the hollowness in my eyes. He pulled me close. We can still have a beautiful wedding, Madison. It doesn't matter who's in the chairs. But it did matter. No matter how much I tried to deny it, the child inside me still longed to see my parents smiling from the front row. A few days later, Chloe came over with a binder. She had put together swatches of color schemes, lists of vendors' mock-ups for centerpieces. She threw herself into the role of maid of honor with a ferocity that left me both grateful and uneasy. "They'll come around," she promised as we sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by scraps of ribbon. "And if they don't, I'll be there. You won't be alone." I smiled weakly, nodding, clinging to her words like a lifeline. But the gnawing fear never left. Late at night, lying awake beside Ethan, I replayed every conversation with my parents, searching for hidden warmth. There was none. Just distance, just excuses. One evening, I opened my laptop to finalize the guest list. On the screen, rows of names stretched out, most of them friends, colleagues, Ethan's relatives. The space for my own family looked painfully sparse. I traced my finger over the empty rows, whispering to myself, "For once, I just want to matter." I thought back to every holiday they had forgotten, every birthday they had brushed off, every milestone they had missed, because Emily's needs were always bigger, louder, shinier. I tried to tell myself that a wedding would be different. A wedding was monumental. Surely this time they would show up. Surely. But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the truth. I had no idea that the confirmation was coming sooner than I could imagine. That within days I would overhear words that would rip away even the last scraps of hope. Words that would make it clear nobody from my family ever intended to stand by my side as I walked down the aisle. It happened on a Tuesday night, the kind of quiet evening when the world outside my apartment seemed far away. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, his laptop still glowing faintly with spreadsheets from work. I padded into the kitchen for a glass of water, phone in hand, scrolling absently through emails, when a notification popped up, an unintentional group call from my parents' number. At first I thought it was a mistake, but when I pressed my ear to the phone, the line didn't disconnect. I froze, voices filtered through low but unmistakable. My mother's first. "So Emily, have you confirmed the venue for the engagement party?" My blood ran cold. "Engagement party?" Emily's voice followed, sweet but edged with excitement. "Yes, the deposit's down. It'll be the same weekend. Saturday night. Saturday night. My wedding day." My father chimed in, hesitant. "But isn't that Madison's?" "She won't mind," Mom interrupted, her tone sharp. "Besides, family comes first. Emily deserves her moment." I pressed a hand against the counter to steady myself. The glass of water slipped, shattering across the tiles. I barely noticed the shards. Emily laughed lightly, the sound like nails down a chalkboard. "Honestly, Dad, no one wants to sit through Madison's boring little ceremony. My party will be unforgettable. It's better this way." Their words drilled into me like knives. I wanted to hang up, to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't. My mother's voice dropped lower. "Then it's decided. We'll all go to Emily's engagement. Madison will understand. She always does. Understand." That word nearly broke me. They had just planned to abandon me on my wedding day, as casually as if they were discussing dinner reservations. The call clicked off, leaving me in silence, broken only by my ragged breathing. Ethan stirred in the living room, but I didn't move. I stayed rooted to the kitchen floor, surrounded by shattered glass, my heart splintering right along with it. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had misheard. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, maybe they didn't mean it that way. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I called Mom. "Did you get the wedding invitation?" I asked, voice trembling. "Yes, honey, we did," she said smoothly. "But you know how hectic things are right now. Emily's planning something very special." For the same day as my wedding, I demanded. A pause. Then, in that syrupy, patronizing tone I had known all my life, she said, "Couldn't you reschedule, Madison? It would make things easier for everyone." Reschedule my wedding. The word burned in my ears. I've signed contracts. 60 guests are flying in. I can't just move it because Emily decided she wanted her party that night. Mom sighed as if I were the difficult one. "You've always been so stubborn. We'll try to make it for part of your ceremony, but we really can't miss Emily's big moment. You understand, don't you? There it was again. Understand. As if my pain was an inconvenience, something to be brushed aside. When I hung up, Ethan was watching me from across the room, his jaw tight. What did they say? I told him everything, the overheard call, Mom's suggestion to reschedule, the casual cruelty of it all. His face hardened with fury, but his voice stayed soft for my sake. They're making a choice, Madison. And it's the wrong one. But their betrayal doesn't change the fact that we'll still marry each other. That's what matters. His steadiness was a lifeline, but my insides still churned. Later, I texted Emily directly. Congrats on your engagement. But why the same date as my wedding? Her reply came hours later, flippant. Sorry, everything's already booked. Maybe you can stop by after your reception. Stop by. As though my wedding day was a casual errand I could squeeze in before attending hers. I showed Chloe the messages the next day. She read them, her face twisting with anger. That's insane. They can't expect you to reschedule your wedding for an engagement party. Not even a real wedding, Madison, just a party. I nodded mutely, but my throat ached. You have me, Chloe pressed her hand, gripping mine. And Ethan. And all the people who love you. If they don't come, it's on them, not you. Her conviction made me want to believe her. But the image of empty seats haunted me every time I closed my eyes. As the weeks passed, I kept reaching out, desperate for even the smallest sign they'd change their minds. Each time I got the same responses, excuses, silence, or vague promises. Dad mumbled about being torn between two daughters, as though choosing Emily yet again was somehow noble. One night, I sat on the balcony of our apartment, phone in my lap, scrolling through Emily's Instagram. She had posted a photo of herself trying on a shimmering dress, captioned "Final fitting for Saturday's big night. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone who matters." Everyone who matters. I slammed the phone down, my chest heaving. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just that they had chosen her. It was that they didn't even see me as part of the family worth choosing. When I finally crawled into bed, Ethan pulled me close. His voice was firm, almost fierce. We'll still have the wedding. We'll still have joy. They can't take that from us unless you let them. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold onto the love I had found, the future I was building. But the truth echoed. Like a drumbeat in my head, I had overheard the conversation that sealed my fate. My own parents had already decided, and for the first time I began to wonder what kind of daughter I was to them, because clearly I was not the one worth showing up for. The week before the wedding, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Dark circles hollowed my eyes, my shoulders slumped under the weight of betrayal. Every time I checked my phone, there was a new post from Emily flaunting her engagement party, a centerpiece mock-up dripping with crystals, a photo of her fiancé popping champagne, a caption that read, "Counting down the days until the night of our lives." My wedding day apparently didn't exist. I called my parents again, one last attempt to salvage something. Dad answered, his voice brisk. "Madison, I'm in the middle of helping Emily finalize details. Can this wait?" "No, Dad," I said, my throat tightening. "It can't wait. I need to know if you're walking me down the aisle on Saturday." Silence stretched, and then came his sigh. "Your mother needs me here. There's so much to do for the party." My hand shook around the phone. "So Emily's party is more important than your oldest daughter's wedding." "That's not fair," he snapped. "We didn't plan for the dates to clash." "There's no clash," I said bitterly. "You chose." The call ended with his cold, "I hope you have a nice wedding," and I sat staring at the wall, too stunned even to cry. When Ethan came home, he found me still frozen on the couch. He sat beside me, wrapping me in his arms. I whispered into his chest, "I feel like an orphan." "You're not," he said fiercely. "You're my wife-to-be. You're about to join a family that wants you, loves you, celebrates you. That's what matters." I clung to him, but the hollowness inside me refused to lift. The rehearsal dinner was set for Friday evening. Chloe promised she'd handle everything. She'd pick me up, keep the wine flowing, make sure I didn't spiral. But that afternoon she texted, Something urgent came up. I might be late, but don't worry, I'll be there before the ceremony tomorrow. A knot formed in my stomach. Chloe had never been vague with me before. I typed everything okay. Do you need help? She replied quickly. All good, just trust me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. At the rehearsal, Ethan's family filled the pews with laughter hugs and warm chatter. His mother kissed my cheek, his father shook Ethan's hand with pride, Olivia snapped candid photos of us walking down the aisle. The officiant guided us through the steps, the ring-bearer practiced with exaggerated seriousness, the flower girl tossed imaginary petals in the air. But my side of the room sat empty. Every row bare. The coordinator asked gently, "Are your parents running late? They're busy." I lied, the word scraping down my throat. Ethan's hand closed over mine. "Their loss," he whispered. Dinner afterward was held in a private room at a cozy Italian restaurant. The table glowed with candles and roses. Ethan's parents toasted to us. Olivia made a speech that left me laughing through tears, and cousins clapped me on the back as though I had been theirs forever. But as plates of pasta arrived, my eyes fell on the empty seats reserved for my family. The place cards with their names sat untouched. My stomach turned and I excused myself to the restroom. Leaning against the sink, I pressed a trembling hand to my chest, willing the tears back. Don't ruin this. Don't let them win. When I returned, I saw Linda quietly gathering the unused cards, rearranging the table to close the gaps. She caught my eye and gave me a small, reassuring smile. I swallowed hard, gratitude burning through the ache. That night, back at the hotel, Ethan kissed me softly before heading to stay with his best man. Tomorrow we'll be husband and wife, he said. Nothing else matters. I smiled for him, but when the door closed, the tears came. I picked up my phone, one last desperate attempt. I called my father. Dad, please, I begged, my voice breaking. I just want you to walk me down the aisle. A long pause, then his voice stiff. Sophia, I'm sorry. Your mother needs me here. You know how important this is for Emily. More important than me. That's not fair, he repeated, his tone clipped. There's no conflict, I whispered. You chose. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said and hung up. I dropped the phone, the sound echoing through the empty hotel room. No more tears came. I just felt hollow, like something inside me had snapped for good. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Chloe. Family emergency. I'll be late tomorrow, but I'll definitely be there before the ceremony. Promise. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. Something about it felt wrong, like a lie told too quickly. I scrolled through Instagram, desperate for distraction, and that was when I saw Emily's post. She stood in front of a mirror in a glittering gown captioned "Final fitting for tomorrow's big night. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone who matters." I tapped the photo, scanning the comments, and there it was. Chloe's name? You look stunning. Can't wait for tomorrow. The phone slipped from my fingers onto the bedspread. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My maid of honor, my best friend, the one person who had promised to stand by me, no matter what. She had chosen Emily too. I grabbed the phone, frantically calling Chloe, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Are you going to Emily's party instead of my wedding?" Dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, her reply, "I'm so sorry, Maddie." She reached out. She said how much it would mean if I came. I thought maybe I could do both, but the timing won't work. I should have told you. I feel terrible. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Terrible. She felt terrible. I felt destroyed. Turning off the phone, I curled on the bed, still in my dress from rehearsal dinner, sobs tearing out of me until my whole body ached. For the first time, it wasn't just my parents or my sister, it was Chloe. Everyone who was supposed to love me had chosen Emily again. I cried until exhaustion dragged me under my pillow, damp, my chest raw. Tomorrow was my wedding day, and I would stand at the altar with empty seats behind me, abandoned by blood, betrayed by friendship. And yet, as sleep swallowed me, a single thought whispered through the wreckage. If they won't stand beside me, then I'll stand alone. Stronger than they ever believed I could be. The morning light poured through the hotel curtains, but I felt none of its warmth. My head pounded from crying, my throat raw, and my body heavy with exhaustion. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, yet every part of me dreaded standing in front of a crowd with empty chairs glaring back at me. I forced myself to sit up, clutching the phone I had turned off the night before. A part of me wanted to check if Chloe had written again to see if maybe somehow she had changed her mind. But I couldn't bear the confirmation. A knock startled me. I shuffled to the door, expecting no one. When I opened it, I saw Allison Turner, my old college roommate, standing there with a cardboard tray of coffee and a bag of pastries. Her smile faltered when she saw my face. "Whoa, you look like you've been through hell." The tears welled up instantly. I hadn't spoken to Allison in months, but here she was. She pushed past me, gently set the food on the dresser, and wrapped me in a hug. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about my parents, about Emily's party, about Chloe's betrayal. My voice shook, my words came out broken, but Allison didn't flinch. She listened, her eyes burning with outrage. "That's disgusting," she finally said. "They don't deserve you, but you know what I'm here. If you'll have me, I'll be your maid of honor today." I blinked at her. "You would do that, absolutely. You're not walking into this alone, Madison." Something fragile inside me cracked, but instead of breaking further, a glimmer of relief spread through. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe I wouldn't be entirely abandoned. The morning turned into a blur of activity. The hairstylist and makeup artist arrived, bustling in with brushes and curling irons. Allison cracked jokes, told stories from our college days, and kept my mind busy while my face transformed from swollen and pale to radiant. When I slipped into my gown, Allison gasped. "Ethan's jaw is going to hit the floor." Her certainty gave me strength. I looked at myself in the mirror, lace draping softly over my shoulders, the skirt flowing around me, and almost believed I was the bride I'd dreamed of being. Almost. Still the ache lingered. No mother to help pin the veil. No father waiting to walk me down the aisle. Then came another knock. Allison opened the door, and there stood Robert, Ethan's father, dressed in his tuxedo, his eyes kind. He hesitated, almost shy. "Madison," he said softly, "Jason mentioned your dad might not be here. If you'd like, I would be honored to walk you down the aisle." The tears came hot and fast. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. You're already family. Today just makes it official." I nodded too, choked to speak, and hugged him. For the first time all morning, the hollow ache lifted just a little. At the venue, I peeked through the small window in the waiting room. Guests were filling seats, their laughter rising in waves. But my side, the front rows reserved for my family, remained painfully empty. The sight sliced through me. I handed Allison my phone. "Please keep this. I don't want to see any more messages." She nodded firmly and tucked it into her purse. 5 minutes, the coordinator announced. My stomach churned, my knees shook. Robert extended his arm. "Ready?" I took it, whispering, "As ready as I'll ever be." The music began. The doors swung open. Faces turned, smiles lighting up, and gasps echoed when they saw me. For a moment the emptiness faded. My eyes locked on Ethan waiting at the altar. His expression, pure awe, love, certainty, anchored me. As Robert placed my hand in Ethan's, my father's absence mattered less. This was the man I had chosen, the family I was building. "You look incredible," Ethan whispered. The officiant began. "We exchanged vows we had written ourselves." Ethan's words broke me open. "I promise to celebrate your victories, as if they were my own, to remind you every day of your worth. Today I gain not just a wife, but a family where love is never conditional." By the time I spoke mine, my voice shook with tears, but held steady enough. "You've shown me that love doesn't have to be earned. It just is. And today I choose you every day for the rest of my life." The kiss, the applause, the cheers, it all blurred together. At the reception, the hall glowed with string lights and fragrant lilies. Friends clinked glasses, laughter filled the air. Ethan spun me in our first dance to At Last, and for a few precious minutes the ache inside me dulled. But when Robert stepped forward to take my hand for the father-daughter dance, the tears returned. His grip was steady, his smile gentle. "You are family now," he said simply. "That's what family does." I nodded, unable to speak. Dinner passed in a haze of toasts and clinking forks. Olivia delivered a speech that left everyone laughing through tears. Ethan never left my side, always sensing when my gaze wandered to those empty seats. Finally, it was time to cut the cake. The photographer posed us Ethan's hand over mine as we pressed the knife through frosting. Guests clapped, cameras flashed, voices cheered. I forced my smile wider, trying to believe the moment was still mine. And then I felt it. A vibration against my hip. I had slipped my phone back into my pocket during cocktail hour, telling myself it couldn't hurt. I glanced down. My mother's name flashed across the screen, followed by a new text. "We need to talk. Now." My chest tightened. Beneath it, 36 missed calls, all from Mom, Dad, and Emily. I froze, knife still in my hand, the cheers around me fading into static. Ethan leaned in, whispering, "Everything okay?" I tilted the screen so he could see. His jaw clenched. "Ignore it. They made their choice." But my pulse thundered, panic clawing at me. They had abandoned me, but now they wanted my attention. 36 calls in 1 hour. Something was wrong. I forced my smile back for the guests, but inside, fear twisted. As I set the slice of cake on a plate, my mind screamed with one question. What could possibly have happened to make them desperate to reach me? Now I slipped out into the garden, the cool night air wrapping around me like a shiver. The laughter and music from the reception hall dimmed behind me, replaced by the pounding of my heart. My hands trembled as I unlocked my phone, scrolling through the avalanche of missed calls and frantic texts. My mother's voice came through on the first ring when I finally dialed back. "Madison," she gasped, her tone frantic, broken. "Oh, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours." I gritted my teeth. "I was getting married, Mom. What could possibly be more important than that?" There was a shaky breath on the other end. "It's Emily," she whispered. "Patrick called off the engagement. Right in the middle of the party." My stomach lurched, but before I could speak, she rushed on. "He said he couldn't marry her because she confessed. She told him what she did to you." I stumbled backwards, sinking onto a stone bench. "What do you mean, what she did to me?" She lied." Mom admitted, her voice breaking. "She told us you didn't want us at your wedding. She showed us fake messages. She even deleted your real ones." We believed her. The world tilted around me. "You believed I would uninvite my own parents. You believed I wouldn't want you there." Dad's voice cut in. I realized the call was on speaker. We should have questioned it. We should have called you directly. But she was convincing Madison. She cried. "She told us you'd said Jason's family was your real family now. She even intercepted your invitation." I pressed a hand to my forehead, the bile rising in my throat. "So you chose to believe Emily, without even speaking to me. After all these years of letting her take center stage, you gave her the power to erase me completely." Silence crackled through the line. Then Mom whispered, "We failed you. Not just today, for years. We don't expect forgiveness, but we couldn't let you believe we abandoned you without knowing why." Their words spun around me, tangling with the memory of empty chairs and Chloe's betrayal. My voice was raw when I asked, "What about Chloe? Why would she choose Emily's party over my wedding?" Dad sighed, his tone heavy. "Emily showed her fake messages too. Told her you'd already replaced her as maid of honor, that you'd only invited her out of obligation." I felt the air leave my lungs. Chloe hadn't just abandoned me, she had been manipulated. But the sting was no less sharp. "Where's Emily now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "She ran off after Patrick confronted her. We don't know where she went." Mom's sob broke through the phone. "We're so sorry, Madison. We want to see you tonight if you'll let us. Please." I sat frozen, staring at the moonlit lawn. Part of me wanted to hang up and never hear their voices again. But another part, the child who had once longed for their approval, needed to look them in the eye. "Meet me at the hotel lobby at 11, I said finally. "We'll talk then." Back inside, Ethan found me still shaking. His hand closed over mine, grounding me. What happened? I told him everything, every ugly detail. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened with fury. "That goes beyond jealousy. That's cruelty. Calculated manipulation." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I need to hear it from them directly. Tonight. Then we'll face them together," he said. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Guests danced, laughter swirled, but my mind was elsewhere, circling around Emily's lies, my parents' gullibility, Chloe's betrayal. I smiled for photos swayed in Ethan's arms, but every second ticked closer to the meeting I both dreaded and craved. At 10:45 we made our exit, rose petals scattering across the hotel steps. I changed quickly, my dress replaced by a simple blue gown, my hair still pinned but loosening at the edges. Ethan laced his fingers with mine as we descended to the lobby. They were already there. My parents sat side by side, pale and haggard, their eyes rimmed red. When they saw me, Mom sprang up, arms outstretched, but I stepped back. "Let's go somewhere private," Ethan said, his voice even but cold. We moved into a small meeting room, the door clicking shut behind us. Silence stretched until Dad spoke. "Madison, what we did, believing Emily, missing your wedding, it's unforgivable. But we need you to know how sorry we are." "Sorry doesn't erase the empty chairs," I said, my voice tight. "Sorry doesn't erase the father-daughter dance I didn't get, or the veil my mother didn't fix, or the maid of honor who left me humiliated." Mom's tears spilled over. "You're right. We can't fix that. But we can start again if you'll let us. We'll go to therapy. We'll do whatever it takes." My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. "Why was it so easy for you to believe Emily? What kind of relationship did we have that made that believable?" They exchanged a look before Dad admitted. "Because we knew. Deep down we knew we had failed you. We favored Emily. We neglected you. When she told us you didn't want us there, part of us believed it because maybe we deserved it." I stared at them, bitterness surging. "So you didn't fight for me. You just let her win." Again. Mom nodded, her shoulders shaking. "We were cowards. And we're ashamed." I wanted to scream, to storm out, to leave them with their guilt. But I stayed rooted, Ethan's hand steady at my back. "I don't forgive you," I said slowly. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But if you're serious about changing, about facing the truth, then prove it. Go to therapy, take accountability, and stop making excuses for Emily." "We will," Dad said quickly. "We promise." Mom's voice cracked. "We love you, Madison. We've always loved you. We just didn't show it the way you deserved." I turned away, my eyes burning. No words could undo the years of favoritism, the casual cruelty, the empty seats. But for the first time, I saw a crack in their armor, a sliver of possibility. When Ethan and I finally left the room, my legs felt like lead. He guided me toward the elevator, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" I thought for a long moment, the image of my parents' broken faces still fresh. "Not yet," I whispered. "But maybe I will be." 6 months passed, and the memory of that night in the hotel lobby lingered like a bruise, tender to the touch, but no longer bleeding. Ethan and I had settled into our new apartment in Seattle, a space filled with light, laughter, and the kind of love I had always longed for. Honeymoon photos lined the hallway, reminders of sunlit mornings in Greece, turquoise seas and dinners under the stars, where I almost forgot the emptiness of my wedding day. But every so often, when the house was quiet, I'd see those empty chairs in my mind, and the ache would creep back in. My parents surprised me by keeping their word. Richard and Helen began therapy not just separately but together. They invited me to join family sessions with a counselor named Dr. Patterson, who specialized in adult family estrangement. I agreed reluctantly, unsure if anything could truly change, but curiosity, and perhaps a sliver of hope, pulled me in. At the first session, Dr. Patterson asked us to name the emotion we carried from the wedding. I didn't hesitate. Abandonment, I said. My voice cracked, but I forced the word out. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and my father looked down at his hands. Guilt, Mom whispered. Shame, Dad added quietly. The honesty startled me. For years they had hidden behind excuses, but now they sat raw and exposed. It didn't erase the pain, but it made me believe that maybe, just maybe, they wanted to change. Emily, however, had vanished after Patrick ended the engagement. 2 months later, she finally resurfaced. My parents told me she had been hiding in a hotel, too ashamed to face anyone. They had convinced her to see a therapist, and eventually she reached out to me. Her text was short, almost desperate. Can we meet, please? Just coffee. I need to say something to you. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it to shut the door forever, but another part needed answers. We met at a small cafe halfway between our apartments. I spotted her immediately. Emily, the golden child now, looking faded and fragile. Her hair was unstyled. Her makeup smudged her usual aura of confidence, replaced by something brittle. Madison, she said, her voice small. I sat across from her, my body rigid. Why, I asked without preamble. Why would you go to such lengths to destroy my wedding? She stared into her coffee, her hands trembling. I've been talking to my therapist about this. I know sorry doesn't even scratch the surface, but I need you to hear me. I did it because I was jealous. My laugh was sharp, bitter. Jealous. You've had everything: attention, applause, our parents' pride, and you still wanted more. Her eyes filled with tears. That's just it. They adored me in public, but behind closed doors they compared me to you. Why can't you be more focused like Madison? Why can't you get good grades like your sister? Why can't you find a stable career like hers? I felt like I was performing every second of my life, trying to stay perfect so they wouldn't leave me. You were real. You built a life. You had friends' achievements. I felt hollow, and when you got engaged, when I saw how happy you were, I hated you for it. I shook my head, disbelief flooding me. So you decided to take everything from me, to fabricate texts, to poison Chloe against me, to erase me from my own family. Her tears spilled over. I wanted what you had. And when I couldn't have it, I wanted to destroy it. It was cruel. I can't defend it. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I studied her face, searching for the sister I had once loved, the girl who had danced in the living room with me when we were kids. But all I saw was someone broken, twisted by favoritism and insecurity. Someone who had chosen cruelty when she could have chosen honesty. I can't forgive you, I said finally. Not now. I'm not asking you to, she whispered. I just needed you to know I see it now. I know what I did. And I'm trying to make sure I never do anything like that again. The words hung in the air, fragile as glass. I didn't know whether to believe her, but something inside me shifted. For the first time I saw not the golden child, not my rival, but a woman drowning in her own brokenness. Over the following weeks we spoke again, slowly, cautiously. Each conversation was strained, but at least it was a beginning. Emily started a job as an administrative assistant, the first real job she had ever held outside of performance. She stopped posting glossy photos of herself online. When she spoke, there was a vulnerability I had never seen before. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents inched forward. They made genuine efforts, calling me to ask about my work, listening, instead of redirecting every conversation back to Emily, even remembering my birthday for once without me reminding them. It wasn't perfect. Decades of neglect don't vanish overnight, but it was something new. Chloe was the hardest wound to address. She sent flowers, cards, endless messages, begging for forgiveness once she learned the truth about Emily's manipulation. I ignored them for weeks. When I finally agreed to a phone call, her voice was thick with regret. I should have called you, she said. I should have known you'd never replace me without saying a word. I believed her lies, and I hate myself for it. Yes, I said, simply. You should have. I'll spend as long as it takes trying to rebuild your trust if you'll let me. Rebuilding trust was harder than I ever imagined. We started with occasional texts, then coffee once a month. The easy intimacy we once had didn't return, but maybe with time something new could grow. Strangely, the person who became closest to me after the wedding was Allison. She had stepped in at the last minute, carried me through the most painful day of my life, and never once asked for recognition. We began meeting regularly for lunch, her presence steady and uncomplicated. She became part of Ethan's and my circle, a reminder that sometimes family is found in unexpected places. One evening, Ethan and I hosted a small dinner party to mark our first anniversary. My parents came bringing a photo album filled with snapshots of my childhood I'd never seen before. School projects, science fairs, quiet moments they had overlooked. Emily came too subdued but trying, and Chloe sent a handwritten note apologizing again. As dessert was served, Ethan clinked his glass. His eyes sparkled as he looked at me. We wanted to wait until today to share this. Madison and I are expecting. The baby's due in June. The room erupted, cheers, tears, hugs. My mother wept openly, my father's face broke into a proud grin, and Emily hugged me gently, whispering, "You'll be an amazing mother." Later that night, when the guests had gone and the apartment was quiet, Ethan wrapped his arms around me. "Are you happy with how things are now?" he asked. I thought of the journey, the betrayals, the confessions, the tentative steps toward healing. "I'm at peace with it," I said honestly. "It's not perfect, but it's enough. And with this baby, I have the chance to break the cycle." I placed a hand on my still flat stomach and whispered silently to my child, "You will never wonder if you are loved. You will never doubt that you are enough." The ache of the past would always linger, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer the daughter begging for scraps of attention. I was a woman who had survived betrayal, reclaimed her dignity, and chosen to build something stronger. And this time, the family I built would not fail me. The night of the reception, while laughter echoed from the dance floor, and Ethan's uncle attempted to teach Olivia's kids the cha-cha, I slipped outside into the venue's small garden to catch my breath. The air was cool, carrying the scent of roses planted along the stone path. I should have been glowing with joy, but all I felt was the hollow space where my family should have been. The empty seats during the ceremony still haunted me like ghosts. That was when my phone vibrated in the pocket of my dress. I frowned, pulling it out. 36 missed calls. A message from Mom, "We need to talk. Now." My stomach flipped as I scrolled. Missed calls from Dad, from Emily, even from Chloe. After months of silence, after abandoning me on the most important day of my life. Now they were desperate to reach me. I dialed my mother, my hand trembling. She picked up on the first ring, her voice frantic. "Madison, thank God. We've been trying to reach you. Something terrible happened." My throat tightened. "What could be so important that you suddenly care? I just got married, Mom. You weren't there." Her voice broke. "It's Emily." Patrick called off the engagement right in the middle of her party. He confronted her. He said he couldn't marry someone who lied about her own sister. I froze on the garden bench, the world tilting. "What are you talking about?" "What lies?" "She told him what she did to you." Mom whispered, her words stumbling. "She admitted it, Madison. She created fake text messages from you ones where you supposedly said you didn't want us at your wedding. She deleted your real messages from our phones, intercepted the invitation you mailed. She told us you'd said Jason's family was your only real family. We believed her." The blood roared in my ears. "You believed that after all the voicemails I left after begging you to be there?" My father's voice cut in. They had me on speaker. "We should have questioned it more. But she was convincing. She even cried about how hurt she was that you'd excluded us. We failed you." I felt sick. My own sister had orchestrated an entire narrative making me out to be the cruel one, and they'd swallowed it whole. "What about Chloe?" I demanded. "She abandoned me too." Was that Emily's doing? A pause? Then my mother's ashamed whisper. "Emily showed her fake texts too. Ones where you supposedly told Chloe you only asked her to be maid of honor out of pity that you had found someone else. Emily told her it would be better to come to the engagement party than face humiliation at your wedding." The betrayal pressed down on my chest, suffocating. Chloe, my best friend, had chosen Emily because of lies, and my parents, too ready to believe the worst of me, had gone along with it. "Where's Emily now?" I asked through clenched teeth. "She ran out after Patrick left her." "We don't know where she is." My mother's voice cracked. "Madison, we're so sorry. We've been blind for so long. Please, can we see you tonight? Tomorrow? Whenever you're ready. We need to make this right." I looked up at the glittering lights strung across the garden, feeling like they mocked me with their cheer. "You missed everything," I said, my voice flat. "The vows. The first dance. You missed me becoming a wife." Silence stretched, broken only by my father's choked reply. "We know, and it's unforgivable. But please give us a chance to explain in person." I ended the call with a promise to meet them later, though every cell in my body screamed against it. When I turned, Ethan was standing a few feet away, watching me with quiet concern. "What did they say?" he asked. I told him everything, his face hardened, eyes flashing with anger I'd rarely seen in him. "She sabotaged our wedding, Madison. She manipulated everyone. That's more than jealousy, that's cruelty." "I need to hear them say it to my face," I whispered. "I need to understand how they could believe her lies so easily." "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" he asked gently. "We could wait until after the honeymoon." I shook my head. "No. I need closure before we leave. I can't carry this with me for 2 weeks." Back inside, I forced a smile as guests toasted us, as music swelled and glasses clinked. No one seemed to notice the storm raging beneath my skin. When Ethan's father pulled me onto the dance floor for the father-daughter dance, I almost broke down, remembering how my dad had chosen Emily's party over me. But Robert's steady hand reminded me that family wasn't only about blood, it was about choice. At 10:45, Ethan and I left under a shower of rose petals. We changed quickly at the hotel and waited in the lobby, nerves coiled tight in my stomach. My parents arrived at 11:15, looking older than I'd ever seen them, their faces lined with guilt. My mother moved to hug me, but I stepped back. "Not yet," I said coldly. Jason suggested we move to a small conference room. The door clicked shut behind us, and the silence was suffocating. Finally, my father spoke. "Madison, we don't expect forgiveness. We only need you to know how sorry we are." "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you missed my wedding," I snapped. "That you believed I would cut you out without even calling me directly. What kind of relationship did you think we had?" My mother's tears streamed freely. "We knew we hadn't been good parents. We favored Emily. We failed to show up for you. So when she said you didn't want us there, part of us believed it because we thought we deserved it. So instead of fighting for me, you gave up." My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "You handed me over to her lies without question. We were cowards," my father admitted. "It was easier to believe her than face how badly we had neglected you." I asked the question burning inside me. "Where is she now? Why isn't she here apologizing?" "We don't know," he said. "She vanished after Patrick confronted her." Something inside me twisted, anger, grief, and the faintest ember of sorrow for the sister who had burned everything down. "I can't forgive you tonight," I said finally. "Maybe not ever. But if you're truly committed to change, then it starts with accountability. Therapy. Honesty. No more excuses." They nodded quickly, desperate. "Anything," my mother said. "We'll do anything." We spoke for another hour, painful, necessary words that peeled back years of dysfunction. There was no magical reconciliation, no group hug to erase the past. But as Ethan and I finally left for our room, drained but strangely lighter, I realized something had shifted. For the first time, my parents had admitted the truth. And for the first time, I believed they might actually try to change. Emily showed up on a rainy Thursday afternoon, standing outside my office building with an umbrella that dripped water onto her shoes. For a moment I thought I was imagining her, this sister I had avoided for months, until she lifted her head, and I saw the same familiar eyes now clouded with something I'd never seen before. Shame. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. I hesitated, my instinct screaming to walk past her to protect myself. But something in her slumped shoulders made me pause. I nodded, leading her to the cafe across the street. Inside, the warmth of roasted coffee beans and low chatter surrounded us. Emily wrapped both hands around her cup as though trying to draw strength from the heat. "I don't know where to start," she said finally. "Sorry seems empty, but I have to try." I crossed my arms. "Start with why? Why would you go that far? Why fake text sabotage my wedding? Make sure our parents believed I didn't want them there? What did I ever do to deserve that?" Her lips trembled. "You were everything I wasn't. You were steady. You were real. I've spent my whole life being their golden child, but it was a performance. Do you know what it's like, Maddie? To know that if you don't sparkle, you'll disappear. They praised me in public, but at home, they compared me to you. Why can't you be as focused as Madison? Why can't you find a stable career like hers? I felt like a fraud. When you got engaged, I saw how happy you were, how whole, and I hated you for it." Her words pierced me, but I forced myself not to soften. "So instead of working on yourself, you destroyed the one moment I'd been waiting for all my life." "I thought if I ruined your day, I'd feel better," she whispered. Tears streaked down her cheeks. But I only felt worse. Patrick left me because of it. My career is gone. And I did it to myself. I stared at her, a storm raging inside me. Anger, grief, and somewhere deep down pity. "You didn't just ruin a day, Emily. You shattered my trust. You turned my best friend against me. You made me walk down the aisle without my parents. That isn't just jealousy, that's cruelty." Her chin dropped. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I want to change." Silence stretched between us, heavy and raw. I studied her face, the girl who once danced in the living room with me, who begged me to braid her hair, who laughed so loud it rattled the windows. Somewhere along the way, that girl had been swallowed by our parents' toxic favoritism, twisted into someone desperate for validation at any cost. Finally, I said, "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I hear you." Her shoulders sagged, relief flickering in her eyes. "That's more than I deserve." We parted without hugs, without promises. But for the first time, the door between us wasn't slammed shut. It was cracked open just a little. That night I lay awake beside Ethan, staring at the ceiling. "She admitted everything," I murmured. He turned to me, eyes soft but steady. "And how do you feel?" I exhaled slowly. "Like I've been carrying a weight for years, and maybe now I can finally start to put it down." The weeks that followed brought tentative progress. Emily took a job as an office assistant, not glamorous, not spotlight-worthy, but honest work. She moved out of our parents' house and into a small apartment. When she texted me photos of her cooking attempts, burnt pasta, lopsided pancakes, I almost smiled. Meanwhile, my parents were different too. They asked about my projects at work, remembered Ethan's birthday, even joined us for Sunday dinners. Once my father handed me a folder filled with clippings about biomedical research. "Thought these might interest you," he said shyly. It was the first time in years he had looked at me not as Emily's shadow but as myself. Trust didn't rebuild overnight. Sometimes their words still triggered old wounds, sometimes I still bristled. But there was effort, and that effort mattered. Chloe was a harder case. She sent me long emails, handwritten letters, little gifts left at my door. For weeks I ignored them. Then one afternoon I found her waiting on the steps outside my building. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she held out a photo of us from college, two girls grinning with arms slung around each other. "I was stupid," she said. "I believed her lies because I was scared of losing you. But in trying to keep her happy, I lost you anyway. Please, Maddie, let me try to earn your trust again." The bitterness rose, but so did the memory of countless nights when she had been my family before Ethan, before everything. "I can't pretend it didn't happen," I said slowly. "But if you're serious about making this right, it starts small. Texts, coffee. We'll see where it goes." Her relief was palpable. "I'll take whatever you give me." And so we began again, cautiously, awkwardly, but trying. Through it all, Allison remained a constant. She came for dinners, cheered me on at work presentations, even helped me pick out baby furniture when Ethan and I shared the news with her first. She never asked for recognition, never demanded anything. She simply showed up, the one thing my family had never mastered. One year after the wedding, Ethan and I hosted a dinner party in our apartment. The table was small but warm, set with candles and simple dishes. My parents arrived with an album of childhood photos. Emily brought a cake she had baked herself, and Allison laughed as she poured wine. For once, there was no competition, no spotlight. Just family, or something close enough. As the plates were cleared, Ethan stood, glass raised. "We wanted to wait until tonight to tell you," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Madison and I are expecting. The baby's due in June." The room erupted in cheers, hugs, and tears. My mother cried openly, my father beamed with pride, and Emily hugged me tightly, whispering, "You'll be an incredible mother." Later, after everyone had left and the apartment was quiet, Ethan asked softly, "Are you happy with how things are?" Now I rested a hand on my stomach, still flat beneath my dress, but full of promise. "I'm not sure happy is the word, but I'm at peace, and that's more than I ever thought I'd have." He kissed my forehead, pulling me close, and for the first time I believed him when he said, "We're building something better." 6 months after the wedding, Ethan and I had settled into a rhythm that felt almost too ordinary after the storm we'd weathered. Our apartment in Seattle was cozy, our routines, steady morning coffee together, long walks on weekends, evenings curled up on the couch planning our future. But beneath the comfort I carried an ache that never fully went away. My wedding day still lived inside me like a scar, tender, raw, whenever I brushed against it in memory. My parents had started therapy. Richard and Helen Jenkins, who once scoffed at the idea of talking to a stranger about feelings, now drove across town every Thursday evening to meet with a family counselor. They invited me to join them one evening, their voices tentative but determined. "We want to make this right," my mother said over the phone. "We know we can't erase the past, but we want to learn how to be better. For you." I sat with the invitation for days before agreeing. Walking into that therapist's office felt like stepping into a courtroom where decades of favoritism and silence would finally be put on trial. The first session was brutal. I sat across from them, arms crossed, as the therapist asked us to name the words that described our family. "Excluded," I said immediately. My mother flinched. My father stared at the carpet. They admitted their faults haltingly, awkwardly, but at least honestly. For the first time, they didn't defend themselves or hide behind Emily's brightness. Healing isn't linear, the therapist reminded us. There will be progress, and there will be setbacks. What matters is commitment to the process. I wasn't sure if I believed them yet, but I wanted to try. Then came Emily. She'd been quiet since Patrick ended their engagement, moving out of our parents' house into a rented studio near the waterfront. For weeks, I ignored her attempts at contact. Then one rainy Tuesday, she sent a text, "Can we meet? I need to say this in person." I almost deleted it, but something, curiosity maybe, or the echo of the bond we once had, made me agree. We chose a small cafe on Madison Street, halfway between our apartments. I arrived early, my stomach twisted in knots. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller, thinner, her usual glow dimmed. The girl who once demanded every spotlight now carried herself like a shadow. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice raw. "How about the truth?" I replied. "Why did you sabotage me? Why lie to our parents? Fake messages ruin the one day I was supposed to have. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. Because I was jealous, Maddie. I've been jealous of you my whole life. The word struck me like a slap. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Jealous you were the golden child. The one with the recitals, the trophies, the applause. I was the one left sitting alone in the bleachers. You don't understand, she whispered. They adored me in public, yes. But at home they compared me to you constantly. Why can't you be more disciplined like your sister? Why can't you have a real career like Madison? I felt like a fraud. Everything I did was for show. You had what I couldn't fake, focus, integrity friends who loved you for who you were. When you got engaged to Ethan, I saw how complete your life was, and I hated you for it. My throat tightened, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her no excuse could justify the cruelty of what she'd done. Instead, I asked quietly, "So, your answer was to destroy me? I thought, if I ruined your day, I'd feel better," she admitted, wiping her nose with a napkin. But all it did was hollow me out even more. Patrick left. My reputation's gone. I lost everything. And it's my fault. Anger flared in me like fire, but so did something else, pity maybe, or recognition of the twisted way favoritism poisoned both of us. She had been the golden child, but also the one trapped under the weight of maintaining that image. You didn't just ruin a day, I said, my voice sharp. You shattered my trust. You made me walk down the aisle without my parents. That's not sibling rivalry, Emily. That's cruelty. Her chin trembled. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm in therapy. I'm trying. I want to change. I don't want to be this person anymore. I leaned back, folding my arms, trying to steady my breathing. For years I had painted her as the villain and myself as the victim. But sitting here, I realized we were both products of the same toxic system. The favoritism that excluded me had also broken her, though in a different way. For a long time I didn't speak. The cafe's hum filled the silence, spoons clinking against mugs, rain tapping on the window. Finally I said, I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I hear you. That's all I can give you right now. Her shoulders slumped, but a flicker of relief crossed her face. That's more than I deserve. We parted without hugs, without promises. Just two sisters sitting in the wreckage of what had been, staring at the possibility of something different. That night, lying in bed beside Ethan, I told him everything. He listened quietly, his hand resting over mine. So he asked softly, "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. Like I've been holding my breath for years. And maybe I can finally start to exhale. In the weeks that followed, Emily tried to show she was serious about change. She took a job as an administrative assistant, not glamorous, not on stage, but honest work. She texted me photos of her first paycheck, her burnt attempts at cooking, her messy apartment. Small things but real. My parents kept up their therapy too. One evening, my father showed up with a folder of articles on biomedical research. "Thought you'd find these interesting," he said almost shyly. For the first time, he wasn't trying to impress Emily through me. He was simply paying attention. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. There were still moments when my mother's praise for Emily made me tense, when old wounds reopened. But the effort was there, and that effort mattered. I realized then that maybe the real revenge wasn't punishing them or cutting them off forever. Maybe it was forcing them to face the truth, to see the damage favoritism had caused, and to make them work for a relationship with me on my terms. Emily's apology hadn't erased what she'd done, but it cracked the door open. And for the first time in years, I considered stepping through, not for her sake, not even for my parents, but for myself. Because carrying anger had been exhausting. Letting it go even a little felt like breathing again. 1 year after my wedding, the apartment Ethan and I shared felt warmer than I ever imagined it could. The scars of that day were still with me, but so were the lessons carved into my bones, like reminders of who I had become. I no longer woke up with the heaviness of waiting for my parents' approval. I no longer measured my worth against Emily's spotlight. I had built my own family, one rooted in love, boundaries, and truth. On our first anniversary, Ethan and I decided to host a small dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a few friends, my parents Emily and Allison. I set the table with simple white plates, a bouquet of sunflowers in the center, and candles that flickered like steady heartbeats. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the apartment, mingling with the faint notes of jazz from Ethan's playlist. My parents arrived first, carrying a thick leather-bound album. My mother handed it to me with a tentative smile. "We spent months putting this together," she said softly. Inside were photos from my childhood, science, fair ribbons, graduation caps, quiet moments I never thought they'd noticed. "We want you to know we always saw you, even if we didn't say it enough." I blinked back, tears tracing my 12-year-old face in a photo where I stood clutching a math trophy. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. Emily arrived next, balancing a cake box in her hands. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room before settling on me. "It's homemade," she said quickly. "It might be terrible, but I tried." When I opened the box to see a slightly lopsided chocolate cake, dusted with powdered sugar, I smiled. "It's perfect," I told her. And in her relieved grin, I caught a glimpse of the little sister I used to braid hair for on sleepy Sunday mornings. Allison showed up, last, arms loaded with bottles of wine. "Hope you're ready to celebrate properly," she laughed, already moving to hug me. She had been my rock, the unexpected anchor when everything else had collapsed. Tonight she fit into my family's circle, as if she had always belonged. Dinner was noisy, messy, alive with laughter. My father told an embarrassing story about his first attempt at grilling when I was a kid. Emily rolled her eyes but smiled when Ethan teased her about her lopsided cake. Allison toasted to family by blood, by choice, and by resilience. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider at my own table. After dessert, Ethan tapped his glass with a spoon, his eyes twinkling. "There's something we've been waiting to share," he announced, reaching for my hand. I nodded, my heart thudding with joy. "We're expecting," he said. "The baby is due in June." The room erupted. My mother cried openly, clutching my hands in hers. My father's face lit up with pride I had long craved. Emily hugged me, her voice trembling as she whispered, "You're going to be the mother I always wished we had." For a moment I couldn't breathe, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just been spoken into existence. This new life growing inside me was proof that cycles could be broken, that love could be rewritten. Later that night, after everyone left and the apartment was quiet again, Ethan and I sat on the couch, surrounded by empty glasses and half-burned candles. He looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Are you happy with how things are now?" I thought about it carefully. The truth was complicated. There were still cracks in my relationship with my parents. Emily's apology hadn't erased the pain. Chloe's betrayal still lingered like a bruise that faded but never disappeared. But peace had begun to grow where bitterness once thrived. "I'm at peace," I said finally, resting a hand on my still flat stomach. "It's not perfect. It may never be. But we're building something new, something healthier. That's enough for me." Ethan kissed my forehead and whispered, "Our baby will never doubt how loved they are." I closed my eyes, imagining, holding that child, imagining a future where birthdays weren't forgotten, where holidays weren't filled with comparisons, where love wasn't conditional. That was the revenge I had chosen, not to destroy, not to retaliate, but to rise above and create the family I deserved. Because forgiveness, I had learned, wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about choosing not to let it define the future. And as I sat there with Ethan, the man who had seen my scars and loved me anyway, I realized something else. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't payback. It's living fully, loudly, joyfully, in spite of those who once tried to silence you. So now I want to ask you, have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who broke it completely? How did you balance forgiveness with protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I know I'm not the only one who's walked this road. If my story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thank you for listening, and remember, These scars don't make you weaker. They prove you survived. And survival, that's its own kind of victory.